he was given his special plate of nuggies with ketchup, and he sulked, and he didn't even eat them. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to the whole we almost lost our democracy thing.
When Republican leader Kevin McCarthy heard the president say he was going to the Capitol, he called you, Ms. Hutchinson. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And in this text message, you told Tony Ornato, quote, "McCarthy just called me too. And do you guys think you're coming to my office?" Tell us about the call that day with Leader McCarthy during the president's speech on the ellipse.
I was still in the tent behind the stage, and when you're behind the stage, you can't really hear what's going on in front of you. So when Mr. McCarthy called me with this information, I answered the call, and he sounded rushed, but also frustrated and angry at me. And I was confused because I didn't know what the president had just said. He then explained, the president just said he's marching to the Capitol. You told me this whole week you aren't coming up here. Why would you lie to me? I said, I'm not lying. I wasn't lying to you, sir. We're not going to the Capitol. And he said, well, he just said it on stage, Cassidy. Figure it out. Don't come up here. I said, I'll run the traps on this, and I'll shoot you a text. I can assure you we're not coming up to the Capitol. We've already made that decision. He pressed a little bit more, believing me, but I think frustrated that the president had said that. And we ended the phone conversation after that. I called Mr. Ornato to reconfirm that we weren't going to the Capitol, and which was also in our text messages. I sent Mr. McCarthy another text telling him the affirmative that we were not going up to the Capitol, and he didn't respond after that.
And we understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that the plans for the president to come up to the Capitol had included discussions at some point about what the president would do when he came up to the Capitol on January 6th. Let's look at a clip of one of your interviews discussing that issue with the committee.
When you were talking about a scheduled movement, did anyone say what the president wanted to do when he got here?
No. Not that I can specifically remember. I remember hearing a few different ideas discussed between Mark and Scott Perry, Mark and Rudy Giuliani. I don't know which conversations were elevated to the president. I don't.
This woman has to have some dope fucking anti-anxiety medication for prescription. Okay, I can practically see her vibrating, like here and in the live testimony. Jesus Christ, I can hear her heartbeat.
Know what he personally wanted to do when he went up to the Capitol that day. I know that there were discussions about him having another speech outside of the Capitol before going in. I know that there was a conversation about him going into the House chamber at one point.
As we've all just heard, in the days leading up to January 6th, on the day of the speech, both before and during and after the rally speech, President Trump was pushing his staff to arrange for him to come up here to the Capitol during the electoral vote count. Let's turn now to what happened in the president's vehicle when the Secret Service told him he would not be going to the Capitol after his speech. First, here is the president's motorcade leaving the ellipse after his speech on January 6th.
Teeny tiny little window. That's like a 3-inch thick window right
Ms.
there.
Hutchinson, when you returned to the White House in the motorcade after the
super irrelevant, autism kicking in, sorry. Did you know that the president's like motorcade car, the car that the president takes when in the motorcades, is like the most armored thing in the universe? Apparently, like there are certain roads that it can't go on because it weighs like 8 times as much as a car like regular of its size. Like it's essentially a tank. I mean, like there are paths it can't take because it's so heavy. Yeah, it's no, literally, like I think there was even an incident back back in the 90s or something where it got stuck because the car was so heavy that it went over a hill, and like the hill tip scraped against the underside, like the suspension rode so low because of the weight. Yeah, it's supposed to be able to withstand like anti-tank shells or whatever. It's, yeah, completely impenetrable. Windows, 5 layers of glass and polycarbonate. They can withstand armor-piercing bullets. The only window that can open by just 3 inches in the driver. Oh, they can't even open their windows. Hope they have good AC in there. Tear gas grenade launchers. Holy shit. America #1. Reinforced steel plate protects against bombs. Kevlar reinforced tires are shred and puncture resistant with steel rims underneath, enabling the car to escape even if the tire is destroyed. Pump action shotguns, tear gas cannons, president's blood on board so that he can have an infusion if he needs it. 5-inch thick military grade armor. Jesus Christ. I think this is literally like what tanks get. I mean, I guess it depends on the tank, but like, geez. Heavy. Armor pill. Fuel tank filled with a special foam that prevents it from exploding even a direct hit. Damn. Doors. Armor plated 8-inch thick and the weight of a cabin door and a Boeing 757. When closed, they form a 100% seal to protect the occupants in the event of a chemical attack. Unless the driver opens the window by 3 inches. That's the weak point right there. You have to get him on a muggy day, and then the chemical attack. Sorry.
President's speech, where did you go?
When I returned to the White House, I walked upstairs towards the Chief of Staff's office, and I noticed Mr. Ornato lingering outside of the office. Once we had made eye contact, he quickly waved me to go into his office, which was just across the hall from mine. When I went in, he shut the door, and I noticed Bobby Engel, who was the head of Mr. Trump's security detail, sitting in a chair, just looking somewhat discombobulated and a little lost. I looked at Tony, and he had said, "Did you effing hear what happened in the Beast?" I said, "No, Tony, I just got back. What happened?" Tony proceeded to tell me that when the president got in the Beast, he was under the impression from Mr. Meadows that the off-the-record movement to the Capitol was still possible and likely to happen, but that Bobby had more information. So once the president had gotten into the vehicle with Bobby, he thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, "We're not, you don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing," the president had a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
What?
Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel.
What?
When Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
And was Mr. Engel in the room as Mr. Ornato told you this story?
He was.
He's a toddler.
Did Mr. Engel correct or disagree with any part of the story from Mr. Ornato?
Mr. Engel did not correct or disagree with any part of the story.
Did Mr. Engel or
Holy shit, dude, he's a fucking toddler. He was having a fucking chicken tendies meltdown in the background. He grabbing the wheel. Yeah, you need to fathom how desperate he has to be for attention to want to grab the wheel of a moving vehicle. How fucking insane that is. And then to attack a Secret Service dude. I swear, I know the Secret Service guy is well trained enough to not do this, but if he had accidentally just disintegrated Donald Trump's arm, like, Donald Trump is like an obese 80-year-old or whatever, and he's the Secret Service guy. Like, if he wanted to, he could have done some ninjutsu shit and it turned his arm into like butterflies or something, you know? Jesus Christ. Could have accidentally, like, yeah, oops, and sent him to the shadow dimension or something. This is why we need to arrest him. He would be really funny at trial. He will be really funny in prison, okay? We don't want him to have the fronted legitimacy, the faux legitimacy of like a fascist dictatorship. We don't want him to have that. He would puff himself up. It would detract from the humor, okay? We need him to be the shadow president from prison, all right? And he can die there. That's what I'm talking about. That's good comedy. Please arrest. It is good content, all right?
Mr. Ornato ever after that tell you that what Mr. Ornato had just said was untrue?
Neither Mr. Ornato nor Mr. Engel told me ever that it was untrue.
And despite this altercation, this physical altercation during the ride back to the White House, President Trump still demanded to go to the Capitol. Here's what Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary at the time, wrote in her personal notes and told the committee about President Trump's desire to go to the Capitol after returning to the White House.
He said, quote, "I wanna."
When you wrote POTUS wanted to walk to the Capitol, was that based solely on what the president said during his speech or anything that he or anybody else said afterwards?
So to the best of my recollection, I believe when we got back to the White House, he said he wanted to physically walk with the marchers, and according to my notes, he then said he'd be fine with just riding the piece. But to the best of my recollection, he wanted to be a part of the march in some fashion.
God, I wish he had marched
And
with him.
just for the record, the beast refers to the presidential limousine.
Yes.
President Trump did not go to the Capitol that day. We understand that he blamed Mark Meadows for that.
So prior to leaving the rally site, when he got off the stage and everybody was making the movement back to the motorcade, I had overheard Mr. Meadows say to him then, as I had prior to Mr. Trump taking the stage that morning, that he was still working on.
Okay, I'm sorry, last thing. Number one benefit to him getting arrested. First of all, in prison, Donald Trump will use his wealth and his connections to continue to send broadcasts out to the world. When people that wealthy go to prison, like if he was like, yeah, can I like record shit and send it out, you know? Like, yeah, it'll happen, okay? But he won't have access to his spray tan, all right? We're gonna get to see him au natural, all right? The pale ghost. That's what we're talking about right there. Like a fat haunting shadow in the corner of his cell. Yeah, no one's talking about this, okay? The comedic potential is unrivaled. We need to arrest him purely for the content, all right? I don't even care about the democracy thing anymore. Just make it happen.
Getting an off-the-record movement to the Capitol. So when Mr. Trump took the stage, he was under the impression by Mr. Meadows that it was still possible. So when he got off the stage...
Mr. President, we're going back to the White House. Sir, we really need to drive you back to the Oval Office.
I had relayed to Mr. Meadows that I had another conversation with Tony. The movement was still not possible. Mr. Meadows said, okay. And then as they proceeded to go to the motorcade, and Mr. Meadows had reiterated, we're going to work on it. So I talked to Bobby. Bobby has more information. Mark got into his vehicle, to my understanding. Trump got into the Beast. And after we had all arrived back at the White House, later in the day, it had been relayed to me via Mark that the president wasn't happy that Bobby didn't pull it off for him and that Mark didn't work hard enough to get the movement on the books.
The physical altercation that Ms. Hutchinson described in the presidential vehicle was not the first time that the president had become very angry about issues relating to the election. On December 1, 2020, Attorney General Barr said in an interview that the Department of Justice had not found evidence of widespread election fraud sufficient to change the outcome of the election. Ms. Hutchinson, how did the president react to hearing that news?
Around the time that I understand the AP article went live, I remember hearing noise coming from down the hallway, so I poked my head out of the office, and I saw the valet walking towards our office. He had said, get the chief down to the dining room, the president wants him. So Mark went down to the dining room and came back to the office a few minutes later. After Mark had returned, I left the office and went down to the dining room.
He would totally be in prison were it not for that one agent, right? 100%. Donald Trump on foot by the rest of the rioters for the Capitol would have a number of effects. First and foremost, a bunch of people would die. 100%, okay? The fucking Trump rioters would act like the goddamn road boys from Fury Road. The Witness Me guys, like with the aerosol on their teeth. They would be fucking chroming their lips and like suicide bombing the goddamn Capitol. They would be losing their shit in the presence of their god emperor. Second, Trump would probably be dead or in jail. I don't think he would be able to resist. He would walk up to some Proud Boy with an AR-15 and go like, "It's very good," like grab the AR-15, "Very good," you know, "That's good, very nice," you know, or some shit. Like, no self-control, complete toddler brain. You know, he would have, he would have done something. It's absolutely no shot whatsoever of of him resisting, if he was in that position.
Dining room, and I noticed that the door was propped open, and the valet was inside the dining room changing the tablecloth off of the dining room table. He motioned for me to come in, and then pointed towards the front of the room near the fireplace mantle and the TV, where I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall, and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor. The valet had articulated that the president was extremely angry at
That's fucking perfect. How do you know when Donald Trump is having a tantrum? Porcelain is shattered and there's ketchup dripping from the wall. That is phenomenal. Literally, that is so good. It is cartoon shit. It is unbelievable. He flipped the porcelain plate that had his nuggies and ketchup, and it hit the wall. And that is absolutely what happened. When they were riding him back to the Oval Office, after the Secret Service guy removed the fat toddler's hands from his throat, he was given his special plate of nuggies with ketchup, and he sulked, and he didn't even eat them. I'm sorry. It's just that it's objectively the funniest thing in the world. I'm so sorry. It's just... Okay, I'm sorry. All right. Okay, back to the whole we almost lost our democracy thing.
the Attorney General's AP interview and had thrown his lunch against the wall.
It was real!
Which was causing them to have to clean up. So I grabbed a towel and started wiping the ketchup off the wall to help the valet out. And he said something to the effect of, he's really ticked off about this. I would stay clear of him for right now. He's really, really ticked off about this.
He's really
right
mad! He wouldn't
Ms. Hutchinson, was this the only instance that you are aware of where the president threw dishes?
It's not.
And are there other instances in the dining room that you recall where he expressed his anger?
There were several times throughout my tenure with the chief of staff that I was aware of him either throwing dishes or flipping the tablecloth to let all the contents of the table go onto the floor and like a breaker go everywhere.
And Ms. Hutchinson, Attorney General Barr described to the committee the president's angry reaction when he finally met with President Trump. Let's listen.
And I said, look, I know that you're dissatisfied with me, and I'm glad to offer my resignation. And he pounded the table very hard. Everyone sort of jumped, and he said, accept it.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. The chair requests those in the hearing room to remain seated.
Will the witness number approximately how many nuggies he has thrown to the ground over the course of your interaction? You know what? I'm taking it all back, okay? I'm with Trump. Just bringing some color into political life again, you know? This is like entering the goddamn Toon World of fucking politics, you know? Holy shit. I'm sorry. Okay.
Until the Capitol Police have escorted our witness from the room. Pursuant to the order of the committee of today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
Oh, good. Thank God. Give me a second. The distilled, visceral imagery of you hear commotion down the hallway, you know, the lights are dimmed. You turn the corner to see a fat gob of ketchup dripping down the wall of the West Wing. Oh, jeez. Trump must be really peeved right now. An unsipped sippy cup flies on the carpet. Commentary defies me. I'm sorry. Let me just...
General Michael Flynn has also taken the fifth before this committee. Mr. Stone previously had been convicted of other federal crimes unrelated to January 6th. General Flynn had pleaded guilty to a felony charge also predating and unrelated to January 6th.
Oh, God.
President Trump pardoned General Flynn just weeks after the presidential election. And in July of 2020, he commuted the sentence Roger Stone was to serve. The night before January 6th, President Trump instructed his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, to contact both Roger Stone and Michael Flynn regarding what would play out the next day. Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that President Trump asked Mark Meadows to speak with Roger Stone and General Flynn on January 5th?
That's correct. That is my understanding.
And Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that Mr. Meadows called Mr. Stone on the 5th?
I'm under the impression that Mr. Meadows did complete both a call to Mr. Stone and General Flynn the evening of the 5th.
Welcome back, chat.
And do you know what they talked about that evening, Ms. Hutchinson?
I'm not sure.
Oh, God.
Is it your understanding that Mr. Giuliani, Mr. Eastman, and others had set up what has been called, quote, a war room at the Willard Hotel on the night of the 5th?
I was aware of that the night of the 5th.
And do you know if Mr. Meadows ever intended to go to the Willard Hotel on the night of the 5th?
Mr. Meadows had a conversation with me where he wanted me to work with Secret Service on a movement from the White House to the Willard Hotel so he could attend the meeting or meetings with Mr. Giuliani and his associates in the war room.
And what was your view as to whether or not Mr. Meadows should go to the Willard that night?
I had made it clear to Mr. Meadows that I didn't believe it was a smart idea for him to go to the Willard Hotel that night. I wasn't sure everything that was going on at the Willard Hotel, although I knew enough about what Mr. Giuliani and his associates were pushing during this period. I didn't think that it was something appropriate for the White House Chief of Staff to attend or to consider involvement in. I made that clear to Mr. Meadows. Throughout the afternoon, he mentioned a few more times going up to the Willard Hotel that evening and then eventually dropped the subject the night of the 5th and said that he would dial in instead.
So General Flynn has appeared before this committee.
Fuck. Okay.
And when he appeared before our committee, he took the 5th. Let's briefly view a clip of General Mike Flynn taking the 5th Amendment. General Flynn.
Cut my nuggies into pieces. Says, well, what do you think Biden eats? Nothing this funny. Nothing even remotely this funny. Man, I don't know. I don't know, man. I feel, do you not feel like the clownish buffoonery is worth the fascism? Throw away all my civil rights. Kill me for being gay. I don't care. Just tell me more stories of ketchup dripping down the walls of the West Wing. All right, that's it. I would rather live a short life on my feet than a long one on my knees. Yes, give me color to life, you know? The brightest stars. Brightest candles. You know how it is.
Flynn, do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified?
Do we have?
Yes.
All right, we're back. Congressman Cheney, could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. General Flynn, do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified?
Can I get clarification? Is that a moral question or are you asking a legal question?
I'm asking both.
I said
You coward. Of course you do. That initial blank out was his consulting with his lawyer, and now he's like he still doesn't have anything. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified morally?
Take the fifth.
You believe the violence on January 6th was justified legally?
Fifth.
General Flynn, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of America?
The fifth.
Of course.
Let's move on now to January 6th and the conduct of Donald Trump and Mark Meadows during the attack on the Capitol. Ms. Hutchinson, I'd like now for us to listen to a description, your description of what
Can you even plead the fifth if you're under those circumstances? The context in which he's a witness, like he's not on trial. You can? When it comes to convicting someone, you should never interpret the fifth as a sign of guilt. In this case, though, you 100% should.
transpired in the West Wing during the attack. For context, in this clip, you describe the time frame starting at about 2 p.m.
So I remember Mark being alone in his office for quite some time, and I know we've spoken about Ben Williamson going in at one point, and I don't personally remember Ben going in. I don't doubt that he had gone in, but I remember him being alone in his office for most of the afternoon, around 2 o'clock to 2:05. Around 2 o'clock to 2:05, we were watching the TV, and I could see that the rioters were getting closer and closer to the Capitol. Mark still hadn't popped out of his office or said anything about it. So that's when I went into his office. I saw that he was sitting on his couch, on his cell phone. Same as the morning where he was just kind of scrolling and typing.
Sorry.
I said, "Hey, are you watching the TV, Chief?"
You can only use it if it would incriminate you. Even though he wasn't on trial, it's possible his answer could implicate him in a crime. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, like, pleading the fifth isn't, I don't think it's that uncommon when it comes to, like, criminal trials or whatever, because, a lot of stuff could potentially incriminate you, even if you're not the criminal. Like, our legal system is pretty complicated. However, I will say, pleading the fifth when asked if you believe in a peaceful transition of power is, slightly sussy, like, if you had somebody up on the stand and you asked them, like, do you think it's good to kill babies? And they pleaded the fifth on that, I mean, you can derive conclusions if you want from that. I give you the right. Yeah, the last one was a softball, because the thing is, the last, so what the last question there, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power, is meant to be a litmus test. It's meant to be a calibration, basically. You start them with questions that they will answer directly, and then you work them up to the line where they start pleading the fifth. So he'll plead the fifth to anything directly about the Capitol, but it's like, okay, can we at least get you to say, like, yeah, you believe in a peaceful transition? But of course he doesn't, and he knows that his behavior isn't consistent with that belief. So he pleads the fifth on that, So yeah, I think what she was trying to do was establish, like, a baseline of what he would be willing to, like, account for. And yeah, he wouldn't for anything,
His TV was small, and you can see it, but I didn't know if he was really paying attention. I said, "You watching the TV, Chief?"
Conyer, thank you. At least you'll know what to look for if he ever gets convicted and goes on the run, Federal agents tracking him across the United States, You've got Detective Holden in the musty, like, porn film studio, traces his finger across, like, a glob of ketchup on the ground and tastes it. Yep, that's Heinz. We've got him.
He's like, "Yeah." So the rioters are getting really close. Have you talked to the president? He said, "No, he wants to be alone right now." Still looking at his phone. So I start to get frustrated because, I sort of felt like I was watching this is not a great comparison, but a bad car accident that was about to happen where you can't stop it, but you want to be able to do something. And I remember thinking in that moment, Mark needs to snap out of this, and I don't know how to snap him out of this, but he needs to care. And I just remember I blurted out, I said, "Mark, do you know where Jim's at right now?" And he looked up at me at that point and said, "Jim?" And I said, "Mark, he was on the floor a little while ago giving a floor speech. Did you listen?" He said, "Yeah, it was real good. Did you like it?" And I said, "Yeah. Do you know where he's at right now?" He said, "Well, no, I haven't heard from him." And I said, "You might want to check in with him, Mark." And I remember pointing at the TV, and I said, "The rioters are getting close. They might get in." And he looked at me and said something to the effect of, "All right, I'll give him a call."
Not long after the rioters broke into the Capitol, you described what happened with White House counsel Pat Cipollone.
No more than a minute and a half later, I see Pat Cipollone barreling down the hallway towards our office and rushed right in, looked at me, said, "Is Mark in his office?" And I said, "Yes." He just looked at me and started shaking his head and went over, opened Mark's office door, stood there with the door propped open, and said something to the Mark's still sitting on his phone. I remember, like, glancing and he's still sitting on his phone. And I remember Pat saying to him something to the effect of, "The rioters have gotten to the Capitol, Mark. We need to go down and see the president now." And Mark looked up at him and said, "He doesn't want to do anything, Pat." And Pat said something to the effect of, and very clearly had said this to Mark, something to the effect of, Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands. This is getting out of control. I'm going down there. And at that point, Mark stood up from his couch, both of his phones in his hand. He had his glasses on still. He walked out with Pat. He put both of his phones on my desk and said, let me know if Jim calls. And they walked out and went down to the dining room.
A few minutes later, Representative Jordan called back.
A couple minutes later, so likely around between 2:15 and 2:25. I know the tweet went out at 2:24. I don't remember if I was there when the tweet went out or if it happened right afterwards, but Jim had called. I answered the phone, said 1 second. He knew it was, I guess he knew it was me. I introduced myself, but I don't remember if he called my cell phone or if he had called one of Mark's. But I answered the phone and said, 1 sec, Mark's on the hall, I'm gonna go hand the phone to him. He said, okay. So I went down, I asked the valet if Mark was in the dining room. Valet said yes. I opened the door to the dining room, briefly stepped in to get Mark's attention, showed him the phone, like flipped the phone his way so he could see it said Jim Jordan. He had stepped to where I was standing there holding the door open, took the phone talking to Jim with the door still propped open. So I took a few steps back. So I probably was 2 feet from Mark. He was standing in the doorway going to the Oval Office dining room. They had a brief conversation, and in the crossfires, I heard briefly like what they were talking about, but in the background, I had heard conversations in the Oval dining room at that point talking about the hang Mike Pence chants.
That clip ended, Ms. Hutchinson, with you recalling that you heard the President, Mr. Meadows, and the White House counsel discussing the hang Mike Pence chants. And then you described for us what happened next.
It wasn't until Mark hung up the phone, handed it back to me. I went back to my desk. A couple minutes later, him and Pat came back, possibly Eric Hershman too. I'm pretty sure Eric Hershman was there. But I'm confident it was Pat that was there. I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. To which Pat said something, this is effing crazy. We need to be doing something more. Briefly stepped into Mark's office. And when Mark had said something, said something to the effect of, he doesn't think they're doing anything wrong, knowing what I had heard briefly in the dining room, coupled with Pat discussing the hang Mike Pence chants in the lobby of our office, and then Mark's response, I understood there to be the rioters in the Capitol that were chanting for the vice president to be hung.
Let me pause here on this point. As rioters chanted, hang Mike Pence.
Well, okay then. That's Donald Trump's Stanley Kubrick moment, Like he's on his booster seat. The ground is smeared with those little ketchup packets, like strewn about everywhere, like hundreds of them. He's got both of his arms leaning forward on the desk. It's just nuggies piled high, but you can see his like evil gaze just peering above the mountain of processed chicken in front of him. There's nothing wrong. He deserves it. The shiver runs down your spine. You take a step backwards, fearfully, stepping on another ketchup packet. It makes a farting noise as it sprays its load on the wall. I can't take any of this seriously anymore. It's so fucking stupid. Trump is the first confirmed autistic president of the White House. We do not claim him, okay?
The President of the United States, Donald Trump, said that, quote, Mike deserves it, and that those rioters were not doing anything wrong. This is a sentiment that he has expressed at other times as well. In an interview with ABC News correspondent Jonathan Karl, President Trump was asked about the supporters chanting hang Mike Pence last year. Instead of condemning them, the former president defended them.
And hang Mike
Because it's common sense, John. It's common sense that you're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right? Yeah. How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress?
President Trump's view that the rioters were not doing anything wrong and that, quote, Mike deserved it, helps us to understand why the president did not ask the rioters to leave the Capitol for multiple hours. In fact, he put this tweet out at 2:24 p.m. Ms. Hutchinson,
Oh, I'll read it if you're not gonna. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth.
do you recall seeing this tweet in which the president said the vice president did not have the courage to do what needed to be done?
I do.
Ms. Hutchinson, what was your reaction when you saw this tweet?
As a staffer that worked to always
my Trump
represent the
impression sucks, I know.
administration
Sorry.
to the best of my ability and to showcase the good things that he had done for the country, I remember feeling frustrated, disappointed, and really, it felt personal. I was really sad. As an American, I was disgusted. It was
Chat rapidly being
unpatriotic. It
reminded
was
that she is a Trump
un-American.
staffer.
We were watching the Capitol building get defaced over a lie. And it was something that was really hard in that moment to digest, knowing what I'd been hearing down the hall and the conversations that were happening, seeing that tweet come up and knowing what was happening on the Hill. And it's something that I still struggled to work through the emotions of that.
Ms. Hutchinson, we have also spoken to multiple other White House staff about their reaction to Donald Trump's 224 tweet, condemning Mike Pence for not having the courage to refuse to count electoral votes, an act that would have been illegal. Matthew Pottinger, a former Marine intelligence officer who served in the White House for 4 years, including as Deputy National Security Advisor, was in the vicinity of the Oval Office at various points throughout the day. When he saw that tweet, he immediately decided to resign his position. Let's watch him describe his reaction to the president's tweet.
One of my staff brought me a printout of a tweet by the president. And the tweet said something to the effect that Mike Pence, the vice president, didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. I read that tweet and made a decision at that
Guys, it's
moment
hard
to
being
resign.
a boomer. Don't make fun of
That's
them.
where
Don't be
I knew that I
ageist.
was leaving that day once I read that tweet.
Ultimately, members of the White House staff, Sarah Matthews, cabinet members Secretary Chao and Secretary DeVos resigned as well. Here is Secretary DeVos's resignation letter. As you can see, in resigning on January 6th, Secretary DeVos said to the president, quote, "There's no mistaking the impact your rhetoric had on the situation, and it is the inflection point for me." Let's also look at Secretary Chao's resignation statement. When Secretary Chao resigned, she spoke of the January 6th attack, and she said, quote, "As I am sure is the case with many of you, this has deeply troubled me in a way I simply cannot set aside." Ms. Hutchinson, in our prior interviews, we've asked you about what the president's advisors were urging him to do during the attack. You've described...
Has there been a single one of the Republicans who have been disgusted and betrayed by Trump's behavior who have actually like fully described the severity of what he's done? Or has it always been like disappointment, you know? I haven't heard any of them come out and like just straightforwardly be like, yeah, he needs to be arrested. This was like an attempt to subvert democracy, you know? It's always like he broke the rule type dealio. I don't think it's a grifter thing. I think it's just what we're seeing there is the latent liberalism present in neoconservatism. I mean, neoconservatism is literally a liberal ideology, you know? The adherence to, you know, proceduralism, the belief in like an ultimate bureaucratic good that will be reached if you maintain faith in the system. That's like neoconservatism also embodies these traits to an extent. Not as much maybe as like democratic liberalism or neoliberalism, but still to an extent. Yeah. So I don't think it's malicious necessarily. I just think, I mean, just kind of an extension of the problem we're seeing everywhere. Fascists are willing to act I was about to say anti-fascists. Of course, anti-fascists are willing to act. I mean, like non-fascists, like liberals or whatever, you know, they're abstemious.
Roughly 3 different camps of thought inside the White House that day. Can you tell us about those?
There was a group of individuals that were strongly urging him to take immediate and swift action. I would classify the White House counsel's office, Mr. Hirschman, Ms. Ivanka Trump, in that category of really working to get him to take action and pleading with him to take action. There was a more neutral group where advisors were trying to toe the line, knowing that Mr. Trump didn't necessarily want to take immediate action and condemn the riots, but knowing something needed to be done. And then there was the last group, which was deflect and blame. Let's blame Antifa. These aren't our people. It's my understanding that Mr. Meadows was in the deflect and blame category, but he did end up taking a more neutral route, knowing that there were several advisors in the president's circle urging him to take more action, which I think was reflected in the rhetoric released later that day in the videos.
You told us that the White House counsel's office was in the camp encouraging the president to tell the rioters to stop the attack and to leave the Capitol. Let's listen.
White House counsel's office wanted there to be a strong statement out to condemn the rioters. I'm confident in that.
Now let's look at just one example of what some senior advisors to the president were urging. Ms. Hutchinson, could you look at the exhibit that we're showing on the screen now? Have you seen this note before?
That's a note that I wrote at the direction of the Chief of Staff on January 6th, likely around 3 o'clock.
And it's written on a Chief of Staff note card, but that's your handwriting, Ms. Hutchinson?
That's my handwriting.
And why did you write this note?
The Chief of Staff was in a meeting with Eric Hirschman and potentially Mr. Philbin, and they had rushed out of the office fairly quickly. Mark had handed me the note card with one of his pens and started dictating a statement for the president.
What did the note say? Yeah, I don't know why they never read it out loud. Anyone who entered the Capitol illegally, crossed out, without proper authority should leave immediately. She's trying to dictate direction. It is incredibly funny that they're trying to avoid the word illegally, even internally. But yeah.
Essentially put out.
And no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. There were 2 phrases on there, one illegal and then one without proper authority. The illegal phrase was the one that Mr. Meadows had dictated to me. Mr. Hirschman had chimed in and said, also put without legal authority. There should have been a slash between the 2 phrases. It was an or if the president had opted to put one of those statements out. Evidently, he didn't. Later that afternoon, Mark came back from the Oval Dining Room and put the palm card on my desk with illegally crossed out, but said we didn't need to take further action on that statement.
So, to your knowledge, this statement was never issued?
It was, to my knowledge, it was never issued.
And Ms. Hutchinson, did you understand that Ivanka Trump wanted her father to send people home?
That's my understanding, yes.
Let's play a clip of you addressing that issue.
I remember her saying at various points, she wanted her dad to send them home. She wanted her dad to tell them to go home peacefully, and she wanted to include language that he necessarily wasn't on board with at the time.
You will hear more about this at our later hearings, but we have evidence of many others imploring Donald Trump and Mark Meadows to take action. Here is some of that evidence, text messages sent to Mark Meadows during the attack. This is a text message at 2:32 from Laura Ingram. Hey, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. In the next message,
this is hurting
all of us. And then he's destroying his legacy and playing into every stereotype. We lose all credibility against the BLM Antifa crowd if things go south.
Ooh.
The president's son, Don Jr., also urgently contacted Mark Meadows. At 2:53, he wrote, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough. As you will see, these are just 2 of the numerous examples of Trump supporters and allies urging the president to tell his supporters to leave the Capitol.
Yeah, you will note, of course, that the only condemnations here are those of optics. All of these people would have been perfectly fine if he had succeeded, killed off his opposition, and seized control of the government, All their considerations here are optics only, when they realized that this wasn't going to work out the way they wanted.
It would not have been hard for the president to simply walk down to the briefing room a few feet down the hall from the Oval Office as Nora O'Donnell noted during an interview with House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, where Leader McCarthy said he believed the attack was un-American.
I want to quickly bring in Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader. Leader McCarthy, do you condemn this violence?
I completely condemn the violence in the Capitol. What we're currently watching unfold is un-American. I'm disappointed. I'm sad. This is not what our country should look like. This is not who we are. This is not the First Amendment. This has to stop, and this has to stop now.
Leader McCarthy, the President of the United States has a briefing room steps from the Oval Office. The cameras are hot 24/7, as you know. Why hasn't he walked down and said that now?
I conveyed to the President what I think is best to do, and I'm hopeful the President will do it.
Republican House member Mike Gallagher also implored the President to call off the attack.
Mr. President, you have got to stop this. You are the only person who can call this off.
Gaydar.
Call it off.
Queen.
The election is over.
His month.
Call
Pride month.
it off.
June.
This is bigger than you. It's bigger than any member of Congress. It is about the United States of America, which is more important than any politician. Call it off. It's over.
Despite the fact that many people close to Donald Trump were urging him to send people home, he did not do so until later, much later. At 4:17 p.m., Donald Trump finally told the rioters to go home and that he loved them. Here's a portion of the video President Trump recorded from the White House.
We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
My little pog champs. Oh, I love them so much. We love you. You're very special. You're my special little guys, my little pog champs, my little poggies. I love you so much. You have to go home now. Tendies await. Stupid.
But as we will show in even greater detail in future hearings, Donald Trump was reluctant to put this message out, and he still could not bring himself to condemn the attack. Ms. Hutchinson has told us that too.
The one that he put out at 4:17.
I'm sure we've discussed it, and just to elaborate if I hadn't already at that point, I recall him being reluctant to film the video on the 6th. I was not involved in any of the logistics or the planning for that video. I just remember seeing the video go out and feeling a little shocked after it went out.
On the evening of January 6th and the day after, the President's family and his senior staff and others tried to encourage the President to condemn the violence and commit to the peaceful transition of power. At 3:31 p.m. on January 6th, Sean Hannity of Fox News texted Mark Meadows. Mr. Hannity said, quote, "Can he make a statement? I saw the tweet. Ask people to leave the Capitol." Later that evening, Mr. Hannity sent another text message to Mark Meadows. This time, he shared a link to a tweet. That tweet reported that President Trump's cabinet secretaries were considering invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office.
Pussies. Should have actually done it. Should have 25th that amendment. That would have been good. That would have been very funny.
As you can see on the screen, the 25th Amendment to the Constitution creates a process for the transition of power if a president is unfit or unable to serve. 25th Amendment has never been used to remove a president. But the committee has learned that after the attack on the U.S. Capitol, this was being discussed by members of President Trump's cabinet as a way of stripping the full power of the presidency from Donald Trump. President Trump's supporters were worried. In addition to the tweet that he sent Mark Meadows after the attack, Sean Hannity apparently spoke with President Trump and warned him about what could happen. We understand that this text message that Sean Hannity sent to Kayleigh McEnany on January 7th shows what Mr. Hannity said to the president. First, no more stolen election talk. Second, impeachment and 25th Amendment are real. Many people will quit. Ms. Hutchinson, you told us that you were hearing about discussions related to the 25th Amendment. Here's part of what you said.
Mr. Pompeo reached out to have the conversation with Mr. Meadows in case he hadn't heard the discussions amongst cabinet secretaries. And from what I understand, it was more of a, this is what I'm hearing, I want you to be aware of it, but I also think it's worth putting on your radar because you are the chief of staff, you're technically the boss of all the cabinet secretaries, and if conversations progress, you should be ready to take action on this. Like, I'm concerned for you and your positioning with this. Reach out to me if you have any questions or I can be helpful with you at all.
Inside the White House, the president's advisors, including members of his family, wanted him to deliver a speech to the
Why the flying F for Fox News pundits talking directly with the president? That is a good question to ask yourself, huh? Why is it that popular media pundits on the right seem to have basically direct connections to the political party they represent? It's not like when there's a crisis in the White House under Biden, they're getting texts from Maddow or the white-haired guy from CNN whose name I always forget, even though I've said it and heard it thousands of times in my life. Anderson Cooper, thank you. It'll just leave my brain immediately. I don't know what it is about his name, but yeah, that doesn't happen, curious. This is probably too for MSNBC or CNN too. Nah. If there was some equivalent constitutional crisis being led by the Dems, there would not be the Biden and his immediate surrounding cabinet members would not be getting direct text messages from if they would, maybe they wouldn't. I just don't know, and I'm wrong. But I feel like if anything, if there's anything that we know about Fox News and conservative media in general, it's that the GOP works hand in hand with them, directly. The level of direct connection between the Democratic Party and MSNBC is nothing compared to the one-to-one unity with the GOP and Fox.
The country. Deputy White House counsel prepared the first draft of what would be the president's remarks on national healing, delivered via pre-taped video on January 7th. When he arrived at the White House on the 7th, Mr. Philbin believed that more needed to be said, so he sat down and started writing. He shared the draft with Pat Cipollone, who also believed the president needed to say more. Mr. Cipollone agreed with the content, as did Eric Hirschman, who reviewed the draft. The committee has learned that the president did not agree with the substance as drafted and resisted giving a speech at all. Ms. Hutchinson, do you recall discussions about the president's speech on January 7th?
I do.
Let's listen, Ms. Hutchinson, to what you told us about that and about the process of crafting those remarks.
I learned from a conversation with Mark and overhearing between him and White House counsel and Eric Hirschman as well that Trump didn't necessarily think he needed to do anything more on the 7th than what he had already done on the 6th. When he was convinced to put out a video on the 7th, I understand that he had a lot of opinions about what the context of that announcement were to entail. I had original drafts of the speech where there were several lines that didn't make it in there about prosecuting the rioters or calling them violent. He didn't want that in there. He wanted to put in there that he wanted to potentially pardon them. And this is just with the increased emphasis of his mindset at the time, which was he didn't think that they did anything wrong. The people who did something wrong that day, or the person who did something wrong that day was Mike Pence by not standing with him.
But the president's advisors urged him to give the speech.
Who convinced him to do the video on the 7th?
I'm not sure who convinced him or if it was a group of people that convinced him.
Who was in the group that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of: Mark, Ivanka, Jared Kushner, Eric Hirschman, Pat Cipollone, Pat Philbin. Those are the people that I'm aware of.
Do you know why that group of people thought it was necessary for him to release a statement?
I believe Kelly McEnany as well. From what I understood at the time, and from what the reports were coming in, there's a large concern of the 25th Amendment potentially being invoked, and there were concerns about what would happen in the Senate if the 25th was invoked. So the primary reason that I had heard, other than, we did not do enough on the 6th, we need to get a stronger message out there and condemn this, otherwise this will be your legacy. The secondary reason to that was think about what might happen in the final 15 days of your presidency if we don't do this. There's already talks about invoking the 25th Amendment. You need this as cover.
The president ultimately delivered
Optics. It's always optics. It's always optics. all of like for all of the, hesitancy you see from the Trump admin internally when this went down, it's all optics. It's all, oh, well, it didn't work. Now let's cover our asses, It's not an actual moral opposition to ending democracy. Even though they all knew that the election fraud claims were BS.
Heard the remarks. Unlike many of his other speeches, he did not ad-lib much. He recited them without significant alteration, except one. Even then, on January 7th, 2021, the day after the attack on the U.S. Capitol, the president still could not bring himself to say, quote, "But this election is now over." One other point about the speech, Ms. Hutchinson. Did you hear that Mr. Trump at one point wanted to add language about pardoning those who took part in the January 6th riot?
I did hear that, and I understand that Mr. Meadows was encouraging that language as well.
Thank you, and here's what you told us previously about that.
You said he was instructed not to include it. Who was instructing him not to include language about the pardon in that January 7th?
I understood from White House counsel's office coming to our office that morning that they didn't think that it was a good idea to include that in the speech.
That being Pat Cipollone?
That's correct. And Eric Hirschman.
Ms. Hutchinson, did Rudy Giuliani ever suggest that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
He did.
Ms. Hutchinson, did White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows ever indicate that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
Mr. Meadows did seek that pardon. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I want to thank our witness for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witness, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions.
Is it done?
Without objections,
there's
members
more.
will be
Okay.
permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witness. Without objection, the chair recognizes the vice chair for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking Ms. Hutchinson for her testimony today. We are all in her debt. Our nation is preserved by those who abide by their oaths to our Constitution. Our nation is preserved by those who know the fundamental difference between right and wrong. And I want all Americans to know that what Ms. Hutchinson has done today is not easy. The easy course is to hide from the spotlight, to refuse to come forward, to attempt to downplay or deny what happened. That brings me to a different topic. While our committee has seen many witnesses, including many Republicans, testify fully and forthrightly, this has not been true of every witness. And we have received evidence of one particular practice that raises significant concern.
Huh?
Our committee commonly asks witnesses connected to Mr. Trump's administration or campaign whether they've been contacted by any of their former colleagues or anyone else who attempted to influence or impact their testimony. Without identifying any of the individuals involved, let me show you a couple of samples of answers we received to this question. First, here's how one witness described phone calls from people interested in that witness's testimony. Quote, "What they said to me is, as long as I continue to be a team player, they know I'm on the right team. I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting who I need to protect. You know I'll continue to stay in good graces in Trump world."
It's like a fucking shitty mob boss, dude. As long as you're protecting who you need to protect while being a witness to a fucking congressional inquiry.
And they have reminded me a couple of times that Trump does read transcripts. And just keep that in mind as I proceed through my interviews with the committee.
This is witness tampering. This is unambiguously a crime. This is witness tampering right here. This is a threat. There's absolutely no ambiguity to this at all, 0%. This is witness tampering.
Here's another sample in a different context. This is a call received by one of our witnesses. Quote, "A person let me know you have your deposition tomorrow. He wants me to let you know he's thinking about you. He knows you're loyal and you're going to do the right thing when you go in for your deposition."
Jesus Christ.
I think most Americans know that attempting to influence witnesses to testify untruthfully presents very serious concerns. We will be discussing these issues as a committee, carefully considering our next steps. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
What does that mean? That had better mean something. If that means something, then listen, okay? If that ends up meaning something, then I'm here for this shit.
I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Ms. Hutchinson, thank you. Thank you for doing your patriotic duty and helping the American people get a complete understanding of January 6th and its causes. Thank you for your courage in testifying here today. You have the gratitude of this committee and your country. I know it wasn't easy to sit here today and answer these questions, but after hearing your testimony in all its candor and detail, I want to speak directly to the handful of witnesses.
I'm sorry, I'm blown away by this. Generally, witness tampering is something that you do when you can get away with it. But this is like just obvious. They did it with a phone call that you can have recordings of. You can just have that shit on a voicemail. Again, I'm not some legal expert or whatever, but witness tampering, like, the gold standard of witness tampering is like trying to intimidate a juror or a witness or, like anything like that, right? But like do it in a way it can't come back to you. They just left it there. All's well in Trump world if you protect who you need to protect. Jesus Christ. They've gotten away with everything up to this point. Yeah, it's true. Honestly, like if anything, you can be acting with like just unmitigated confidence. They have been trained. They have been taught that they can get away with anything. What did somebody in chat just say? Where I just saw that. This is worse than Watergate? This is like easily 10 times Watergate. That's not an exaggeration. Not even remotely an exaggeration. This is like every possible level of criminal behavior has been established here. Watergate set a precedent that had monumentous effects on American political discourse. And hey, by the way, it was leading up to prosecution. This is way worse. We have it, as proven as it can be, Donald Trump wanting the mob to be armed so they can kill Pence and presumably others. And at every level since then, they have lied and obfuscated to cover their own asses, up to and including witness tampering. Insane. It is easily worse than Watergate. It's frankly, it's incomparable. I think we can safely say it is the biggest constitutional crisis, the biggest political scandal in all of American history, with the exception of the Civil War. The Confederacy seceding. I legitimately believe that outside of that, and I'm including everything, all the crazy shit that happened early on with the Founding Fathers, even Andrew Jackson ignoring the Supreme Court and genociding the Native Americans, in terms of like the total scale of the institutional fuckery going on here, this in terms of what it could mean. You mean even Iran-Contra? I think this is worse than Iran-Contra. Yeah, I do. Because the main problem here, really, isn't just the event itself. It's the fact that everything up to this point has piled on with no real consequences. I would not be saying this if we lived in a sane country and they had all just been arrested right after the fact. If that was the case, listen, if Jan 6 had happened, and then the Justice Department had moved over to Biden on the 20th, and he was like, it's fun time, and the new DOJ had just rounded them up, and we got a whole Trump jail, right there in the Capitol. Fine, I would be saying that this was crazy, but I wouldn't be. The thing that really makes it this crazy is just the fact that it seems like they're going to get away with it. I don't have faith in the Democrats as an institutional force to do anything here, And this is only going to get worse with time, by the way. The next time this happens, because again, all of the Republicans who got cold feet, they only got cold feet for optics reasons. All the people who are frantically texting, we shouldn't do this, we can't let this happen, they're doing it for optics reasons, because they lost faith in the ability for that specific coup attempt to succeed. But they're going to do it again. They're screaming that they're going to do it again. Christ, look at them. Trump, or at least lackeys close to Trump, still feel comfortable enough in their position that they are engaging in witness tampering, leading into the congressional hearing on the coup attempt. They're insanely confident and insanely open in what they're doing. Really, I think that is what elevates it, well beyond Watergate, beyond all this other stuff. It's just the audacity, the audacity and their vulnerability to prosecution, which is being unacted upon by the Democrats. And their abstemiousness will be our death if something doesn't happen, and they will be complicit if nothing happens. This is the easiest slam dunk. I understand that politically it'll be difficult. Will Republicans, say that you're an authoritarian, you're a tyrant, locking up all their political leaders? Maybe they should have chosen non-criminal political leaders. I'm just spitballing ideas here. I'm just throwing ketchup packets at the wall. Maybe if they wanted to participate in the democratic process, they should have voted for candidates who, aren't criminal wannabe tyrants. Crazy, right? And I would rather have Republicans bitching and moaning about how their political dreams have been squashed by a tyrannical Biden regime or NATO, FEMA, camp, UN, whatever bullshit they're going to complain about. When they start screaming about how the Jews are taking away their, their political voice, I would rather have to deal with that than deal with what will happen if they win. What do you think's going to be worse? I mean, really? We can't arrest all these leaders who are obviously engaging in crimes, openly, brazenly, unambiguously. We can't arrest them. People will get mad at us for it. Well, they're going to be mad at you either way. You get to choose why they're mad at you. They can be mad at you because you stopped their coup attempt, or they can be mad at you because they think you're on the payroll of George Soros and you're their children by wearing panties while having XY chromosomes within a mile radius of their children. That you can choose. They're going to be mad at you no matter what. They're always mad. It's always something. You have chick tracts back in the 1980s where Republicans are screaming about how D&D is turning people into Satanists. These are not irrational people. Sure, there are some rational Republicans, but rationality is highly compartmentalized. Very compartmentalized. Very contextual. Ben Carson is Ben Carson. He's also a leading neurosurgeon. Just how it is sometimes. Crazy world that we live in, believe it or not. I don't know. I don't know if anything is going to come of this. I genuinely don't. If it does, you know what? I will give Biden something that I know he personally craves. He will get my kudos. He will get my thanks, my applause. If something gets done about this, I know he wants this. It's a great honor. I will applaud the Democrats. I hate them. You have no idea how much I hate them. At least, God help me, at least the fascists believe in something. The things they believe in are objectively horrible and empirically incorrect in almost every case. But at least, listen, there's a direction they're moving in, It's like you're stuck in the middle of a desert, the sun's baking you. It's 115 degrees, you're going to die if you stand out there for an hour or two. You got Democrats and Republicans, right? And Democrats are just standing there, They're too indecisive to make a move. They look out at the endless plains stretching before them, the sand dunes, rolling across the horizon, and they're thinking, any direction I take a step in could be the wrong one. So I'll make the right choice. I'll do nothing. I'll make no choice at all. And the Republicans, meanwhile, have found a gigantic scorpion nest. And they think that they will wrestle the scorpions and demand from them, instructions on how to arrive at the nearest watering hole. So they dive directly into the scorpion nest, the Republicans. Now, I don't know if I agree with their decision. I do admire the fact that they're willing to move. I wish I could just get the Democrats to summon that energy away from the scorpion pit, Would you prefer Francis Underwood to... I never saw House of Cards. Sorry. Trump tweets about hearing. There's 5 links all at once. Oh yeah, the House Judiciary started literal emoji posting. I saw this. That was their star witness? Okay, then. Here's Donald Trump on Truth Social. Okay, wait. It goes backwards from here, right? I hardly know who this person, Cassidy Hutchison, is, other than I heard very negative things about her. A total phony and leaker. And when she requested to go with certain others of the team to Florida after my having served a full term in office, I personally turned her request down. She's bad news. Never complained about the crowd. It was massive. Didn't want a request from making people with guns. Who would ever want that? Blah, blah. Her fake story that I tried to grab the steering wheel of the White House limousine in order to steer it to the Capitol building is sick and fraudulent, very much like the unselect committee. It's the unhouse unselect dummity. Her story of me throwing food is also false, and why would she have to clean it up? I hardly knew who she was. What? She changed lawyers a couple days ago, and with her story totally changed. Shocker. Cheney conveniently left out the snippet in my speech, go peacefully and patriotically, isn't she disgraceful? There's no cross-examination of this so-called witness. Her body language is that of a total bull artist, fantasy land. Like, he's been mega cope posting. Yeah, misspelled Cheney. Mega cope posting on Truth Social. Absolutely losing it. Yes, thank you, No Nothing. Yeah, the House Republicans here, look at how they're tweeting, by the way. It's like Trump took over the Twitter account here. Lame duck Speaker Pelosi's illegitimate political witch hunt once again is caught presenting fake news. When will the lamestream media stop airing this kangaroo court? Fake news, sad, you know, blah blah blah. Right, yeah. So basically, like, I will say, illegitimate. I will say that the fact that Trump and some of his close accomplices seem to be having a meltdown over this particular witness, does give me some hope, you know? The fact that she changed lawyers, dropped the GOP appointed one, and, like, you know, presented obviously nervous, indicates this is like a good mix-up. We'll see if the witness tampering leads to anything. Like, obviously, the House, the committee knows who was committing the witness tampering. They just declined to say, which is a good tactic, of course, for a couple of reasons. Please tell people to like the stream, 14K viewers. Okay, sub to my channel. I love you. If you're watching and you're not sub to my channel, it's because you're the witness tamperer. You were the person who sent messages to witnesses called by the committee. You're a disgrace and a traitor to the nation. But you can fix that by subscribing.